The fat girl they left to die in a blizzard became the mountain man's only reason to live. The wind screamed like a living thing as the wagon train vanished into the white. Snow lashed sideways, needles of ice cutting skin raw. Hooves pounded, wheels creaked, and somewhere in the chaos a single voice cracked apart in the storm. "Father, please, don't leave me." Noah Holbrook did not turn around. His boots crunched higher onto the wagon step, his hands gripping the canvas rail as if letting go would pull him backward into damnation. The others shouted for speed, children cried, a whip cracked, and just like that, the wagons lurched forward, swallowed by the blizzard. Mercy Holbrook stood alone, 360 pounds of flesh, soaked wool, and shaking breath, abandoned at South Pass with a broken wagon and a sky collapsing into snow. The cold bit through her boots within seconds. Her fingers went numb. Her name was already being erased by the storm. High above the pass, unseen, a rifle shot echoed, not fired in anger, fired as a signal. A mountain man stepped out of the pines, his coat crusted white, beard frozen stiff, eyes locked on the impossible sight below. A woman, alone, left behind to die. "They left you," he said into the wind, disbelief hardening into rage. The blizzard thickened, swallowing sound, swallowing Mercy. Somewhere beneath the broken wagon, Mercy curled in on herself, breath slowing, thoughts fading. She did not scream anymore. Screaming wasted heat. She waited. For death, or something worse. The mountain man reached her just as her eyes rolled back, just as the cold claimed its due. He tore the canvas aside, lifted her body as if weight no longer mattered, and wrapped her in fur still warm from his own skin. "Stay with me," he growled, more command than plea. "I won't let you die like this." What followed would change both their lives, but none of it would have happened if a blizzard hadn't forced a choice, and a father hadn't looked away. Before we rewind to see how Mercy became disposable, how the mountains broke a man and then gave him something to live for, tell me this. Where are you right now, and what are you doing as you hear this story begin? 2 weeks earlier, the Oregon Trail had still felt like hope. The wagon train stretched across the plains in a long, creaking line of wood and canvas, 12 families bound together by shared fear and borrowed optimism. They rose before dawn, ate in silence, and moved until their joints screamed. Every mile west was paid for with exhaustion. Mercy Holbrook walked more than she rode. She did it without being asked. She knew the looks, knew the whispers that followed her like dust. At 24, Mercy was large in a way the frontier did not forgive. Broad-hipped, thick-armed, heavy enough that every broken axle and slow mourning somehow became her fault. "She's dead weight," a man muttered once near the cook fire, not bothering to lower his voice. "We'd be farther by now without her," another agreed. Mercy pretended not to hear. She always did. Her father, Noah Holbrook, was the wagon master, a capable guide, respected for knowing the passes and rivers better than most. When Mercy was younger, that respect had shielded her. When her mother was alive, kindness still existed in their camp. Then cholera came. Her mother died shaking in Mercy's arms beside the Platte River, lips blue, breath gone before dawn. After that, something in Noah collapsed inward. Grief hardened him. Silence replaced affection. And when the whispers about Mercy grew louder, he stopped defending her. The trail punished weakness, and the people on it learned to imitate that cruelty. At camp, Mercy worked harder than anyone. She gathered dung for fires when wood ran out. She hauled water. She mended canvas and cooked when hands were short. She ate less than her share and pretended hunger was a test of character. It was never enough. By the time the Rockies rose like broken teeth on the horizon, the wagon train was already behind schedule. Early snow dusted the higher passes. The men argued in tight circles, voices sharp with fear. "We push now or we die out here," said Mr. Carson, the loudest and most decisive among them. "And if a wagon breaks?" someone asked. No one answered. Everyone looked at the Holbrook wagon. It was the largest, the heaviest, built to carry a family that no longer existed as it once had. Mercy felt the weight of those eyes more than the cold. South Pass came under a sky the color of iron. The wind shifted. Birds vanished. Experienced men knew the signs, even if they didn't want to name them. The axle snapped halfway across the ridge. Wood cracked. A wheel canted sideways. The wagon lurched toward the drop, stopping inches from disaster. Horses screamed. Snow began falling fast, thick flakes turning instantly to white sheets. Panic took over. "Unload what you can. We don't have time. The storm's already on us." Mercy stood beside the broken wheel, hands numb, heart pounding. She looked to her father, waiting for instruction, for reassurance, for anything that meant she still belonged. Noah would not meet her eyes. Decisions were made quickly when fear outweighed decency. Supplies were redistributed. Children were lifted. Blankets were thrown from wagons already sagging under weight. There was no room left. And suddenly, Mercy understood. She wasn't being left behind by accident. She was being calculated out of the future. The trail had judged her too slow, too heavy, too costly to save, and the people she had trusted agreed with it. When Noah finally spoke, his voice was flat, emptied of anything familiar. "Find shelter," he said. "We'll come back when the storm breaks." Mercy knew the truth. So did he. As the wagons rolled away, the last thing she saw was not the snow or the mountains, or even her broken wagon. It was her father's, back as he climbed aboard another man's future, and high above them all, unseen by anyone below, a solitary cabin stood buried in trees, its owner watching the pass with the wary patience of a man who trusted storms more than people. Mercy Holbrook learned early that pain was something you carried quietly. Long before the mountains decided she was expendable, before the snow erased her footprints from the trail, Mercy had already been trained for abandonment. It started in childhood, not with cruelty shouted aloud, but with smaller things. Chairs that creaked when she sat, dresses that were always too tight, meals where her portion was watched more closely than others. Her mother had been her refuge, a soft-spoken woman who brushed Mercy's hair every night and told her that strength came in many shapes. "You were built to last," she used to say, smiling like it was a secret meant only for them. When her mother died, that voice disappeared from the world. What replaced it was guilt. Noah Holbrook never said it outright at first. He didn't have to. His grief leaked out in silences, in the way his eyes slid past Mercy instead of resting on her. Then came the drinking, and after that, the words that could not be taken back. "If I didn't have to worry about you," he said one night, breath thick with whiskey, "your mother might still be alive." Mercy felt something break inside her that never fully healed. From that night on, she believed that taking up space was a sin, that existing too loudly, too visibly, too heavily meant someone else paid the price. She learned to shrink without becoming smaller, to apologize without being accused, to endure. On the trail, that wound bled quietly every day. When people complained about the pace, Mercy walked farther. When food ran low, she ate less. When children cried from exhaustion, she carried them until her legs shook. She told herself this was how she made things right, how she earned the right to stay. But survival on the frontier was never about fairness. It was about fear, and fear looks for someone to blame. By the time the blizzard came, Mercy had already accepted her role. She didn't argue when they said there was no room. She didn't scream when her father turned away. She simply stood there, heart pounding, knowing that the lesson she had learned her whole life had finally reached its conclusion. You are too much. You are the cost. Alone beneath the broken wagon, as the storm swallowed sound and light, those thoughts became unbearable. Cold worked its way through her clothes, through her skin, into her bones. Her body shook violently, not just from freezing, but from the terror of realizing she had never once been worth fighting for. She thought of her mother's voice and clung to it like a memory of warmth. She thought of Oregon, a place she would never see. And for the first time she allowed herself to wonder if staying alive was even necessary anymore. When consciousness began to slip, Mercy did not pray to be saved. She prayed for it to be over. That was the moment Caleb Rivers found her. To Caleb, she was not a burden under a wagon. She was not a mistake the trail had made. She was a human being still breathing in a place that killed the careless. And something in her stubborn survival cracked open the man he had sealed away for 12 years. When Mercy woke by the fire in his cabin, wrapped in warmth she had not earned or begged for, confusion hurt almost as much as the cold had. Why would a stranger save her when her own people would not? Why would he look at her without judgment, without calculation? Those questions frightened her more than the blizzard ever had, because if she was not a burden here, then everything she had believed about herself might be wrong. And if that was true, then surviving was no longer enough. She would have to decide whether she was allowed to want more than endurance. Caleb Rivers did not plan to become anyone's salvation. For 12 winters he had shaped his life around one principle: survive alone or not at all. The mountains rewarded that rule. They did not care about grief, memory, or regret. They demanded competence and silence, and Caleb gave them both. When Mercy Holbrook woke in his cabin, she disrupted a balance he had guarded with near religious devotion. He noticed it immediately in the way the room felt different. The fire sounded louder, the walls seemed closer. He had grown used to speaking only when necessary, to letting days pass without hearing his own voice. Now there was breathing across from him, fragile, human. At first Caleb treated Mercy like an injured animal, careful movements, few words, no unnecessary closeness. He fed her soup, changed her wrappings, and watched for fever. Practical acts, safe acts. But Mercy was not feral or broken in the way he expected. She thanked him too often, apologized for needing help, tried to sit up before she had strength, as if occupying space required permission. That unsettled him. One evening, as wind pressed against the cabin walls and snow hissed across the roof, Mercy tried to stand without assistance. Her knees buckled. Caleb crossed the room in 2 strides and caught her before she hit the floor. She stiffened instantly. "I'm sorry," she said, breathless. "I didn't mean to—" Caleb held her steady, his grip firm, but not rough. "Stop apologizing," he said, more sharply than intended. Mercy looked up at him, startled. "For what?" she asked quietly. "For existing," he replied. The words hung between them, heavier than the storm outside. That was the first crack in the wall Caleb had built around himself. Later that night, as Mercy slept, Caleb sat alone at the table, hands wrapped around a tin cup he hadn't touched. Her presence had stirred something dangerous, not desire, not yet, responsibility. He knew that feeling. It was the same one that had led him down into the valley 12 years ago, convinced he could protect a family in a land that punished optimism. The same feeling that had left him holding his son's small, frozen body with blood on his hands and no one left to blame but himself. Caleb did not rescue people anymore. He had learned what rescuing cost. And yet, when he imagined Mercy leaving once the snow cleared, walking back toward a world that had discarded her, something in his chest tightened painfully. The next morning, Mercy found him repairing a trapline outside the cabin. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in his oversized coat, watching him work with efficient, practiced motions. "You don't have to keep me here," she said. Caleb did not look up. "I know. I can leave once I'm stronger. I know." Silence stretched. The wind carried snow across the clearing like ash. "Why did you really save me?" Mercy asked. That made him stop. Caleb turned to face her, eyes hard but honest. "Because I know what it looks like when people decide your life is expendable." Mercy swallowed. "And because," he continued, "if I'd walked away, I wouldn't have survived this winter either. Not really." That was the bargain, unspoken but clear. She could stay, not as a burden, not as charity, but as a presence that challenged the loneliness he had chosen. And he would protect her, not because she was weak, but because no one ever had. Neither of them called it a deal. Neither of them named the risk. But in that moment, two people who had been abandoned in different ways chose not to turn away from each other. Winter did not loosen its grip just because Mercy survived the blizzard. If anything, the mountains seemed offended by her refusal to die. Snow kept falling in heavy, relentless sheets. Traps froze shut. Game grew scarce. The world outside Caleb's cabin became a white wall that punished every mistake. At first, Caleb handled everything himself. He hunted before dawn, hauled firewood until his shoulders burned, repaired the roof after night winds, peeled back shingles. Mercy watched from the doorway, guilt gnawing at her chest. She had spent her life being told she was excess weight. Here she felt it again, sharper than ever. One morning she followed him outside anyway. "I can help," she said. Caleb barely glanced back. "Not yet." "I'm not made of glass." He stopped then, turning slowly. "And I'm not willing to bury you." That ended the argument, but not the tension. Mercy hated the helplessness. Every crackling log in the fire reminded her she was warm because someone else bled for it. 2 days later, the first real trial came. Caleb did not return before dusk. Mercy stood at the window long after darkness fell, heart pounding harder with every passing minute. The wind howled louder than she had ever heard it. When the door finally burst open, Caleb stumbled inside with blood soaking through his sleeve. A mountain lion. He had killed it, barely. The claw marks down his arm were deep, ragged, already swelling. He waved off her concern at first, but when fever set in that night, denial became impossible. Mercy took over. She boiled water, cleaned the wounds, and stitched torn flesh with hands steadier than she felt. She fed him broth, kept the fire alive, and stayed awake through the night, listening to his breathing like it was the only sound anchoring her to the world. At dawn, Caleb woke to find her asleep in the chair beside him, chin tucked to her chest, eyes ringed with exhaustion. That was when he understood the balance had shifted. From that day forward, survival became shared. Caleb taught Mercy how to set snares where rabbits were most likely to run. He showed her how to read snow drifts for signs of wind shifts and how to stack firewood so it dried even in constant damp. Mercy learned slowly, painfully, pushing through muscle aches and breathlessness, but she did not quit. Her body surprised him, not in speed or grace, but in endurance. She could haul smaller loads longer than he expected. She could stand in the cold without shaking long after thinner bodies would fail. The fat she had been mocked for became insulation, energy, stubborn resilience. Still, the mountains tested them. 1 week later, a supply cache Caleb had hidden years earlier was discovered empty. Footprints cut through the snow, human, fresh. "Trappers?" Mercy asked. Caleb shook his head. "Too sloppy." Outlaws then, or worse, desperate men. That night, Mercy heard voices outside the cabin, men arguing in low tones, a laugh, sharp and wrong. Caleb pulled her behind the table, rifle steady, jaw clenched. They did not attack. Instead, they left behind a warning carved into a tree near the tree line. Mine. Caleb knew what that meant. Territory, claim. Someone had decided the mountains belonged to them now. Mercy saw something change in him after that. The calm precision gave way to something darker. The same look he must have worn 12 years ago when blood had turned grief into violence. "I don't want you to fight for me," she said that night. Caleb met her gaze. "I'm not." That was a lie, or half of one. The second trial came when Mercy insisted on accompanying him to check the perimeter. Caleb argued until his voice went hoarse, but she stood her ground. "If you go alone and don't come back," she said, "I'd die anyway." He had no answer to that. They moved slowly through the trees, snow crunching beneath their boots. Mercy's breath came hard, but she kept pace. When the ambush came, it was fast and brutal. 2 men, rifles raised. Caleb fired first. One fell. The second charged, slipping on ice, knife flashing. Mercy acted before fear could take hold. She stepped into the man's path, driving her weight into him with a force that knocked them both into the snow. The knife flew free. Caleb finished it. Afterward, Mercy sat shaking, snow melting into her clothes, staring at the blood-staining, white ground. "I didn't think," she whispered. Caleb knelt in front of her, gripping her shoulders. "You saved my life." That truth terrified her more than the attack. The mountains did not stop there. News traveled even in isolation. A trapper passed through weeks later, carrying rumors like poison. A wagon train had reached Oregon late, starved, half dead, only 6 survivors. Caleb did not need to ask. Mercy already knew. Her father was among the dead. His last words, according to the trapper, had been spoken deliriously into the snow. I left her. Mercy did not cry, not then. She sat silently by the fire long after the trapper left, staring into the flames. Caleb waited. "I thought hating him kept me alive," she said finally. "But now there's nothing left to hate." "Then live," Caleb said. "Not for him, for yourself." That was the third trial. Not hunger, not violence, forgiveness. By spring the snow began to recede. The cabin stood intact. They had survived together, but survival had become something else entirely. Mercy could leave now. Trails reopened. Civilization waited beyond the mountains. Caleb felt the weight of that possibility settle into his bones. He did not ask her to stay. He did not offer promises. He had learned what promises cost. Instead, he repaired her boots, sharpened her knife, prepared her to walk away. and every quiet act of readiness felt like another cut, because the final test was approaching. Not whether they could survive together, but whether either of them was willing to choose more than survival. Spring should have brought relief. Instead, it brought the past. The first sign was the horse. A bay mare, thin and limping, wandered into the clearing one afternoon, with a broken rein trailing behind her. Caleb recognized the brand burned into her flank before Mercy did. Oregon Trail, wagon company stock. Someone had turned back. Caleb felt the old instinct surge, sharp and unwelcome. Hide, prepare, survive alone. But Mercy was already outside, hand pressed to her mouth, staring at the mare as if it were a ghost. "He came back," she whispered. They did not speak again until the next morning, when a man appeared at the edge of the trees. He looked older than his years, beard unkempt, eyes sunken with something worse than hunger. Guilt. Noah Holbrook stopped when he saw Mercy standing beside Caleb. For a moment he looked relieved. Then the relief curdled into something ugly and desperate. "You're alive," he said. Mercy did not answer. "I came back," Noah continued, voice breaking. "I tried. The storm drove us off, but I came back as soon as I could." "You left me," Mercy said quietly. Noah flinched. "I made a choice." Caleb stepped forward then, his presence filling the clearing like a wall. "You made a calculation," he said coldly, "and you were wrong." Noah's eyes flicked to Caleb, fear sparking. "Who are you?" "The man who didn't walk away," Caleb replied. Noah dropped to his knees in the snow-melted mud. He begged, not for forgiveness, for relief, for someone else to carry the weight of what he had done. Mercy listened, arms wrapped around herself, heart pounding. She had imagined this moment 100 times, screamed versions, violent versions, but the reality was smaller, sadder, and somehow heavier. "I don't want to carry your guilt," she said at last. "It's not mine." Noah looked up, confusion cutting through his despair. "I survived without you," Mercy continued. "I learned I wasn't weak. I wasn't expendable. You don't get to rewrite that now because it hurts." Caleb watched her closely. This was the twist he had not anticipated. Not an enemy with a gun, not a storm, but a living wound asking to be tended. Noah reached out, fingers trembling. "Come with me. We can still go west. Start over." Mercy looked at the trail behind him, then at the cabin, at Caleb. She realized then the truth that changed everything. She was no longer choosing between safety and danger. She was choosing between a past that defined her as a burden and a future she could define herself. "No," she said, "I'm staying." The word echoed. Final. Noah wept openly now, shoulders shaking. Caleb said nothing. He simply waited. "I won't stop you," Mercy added, "but you can't stay either." Noah left before nightfall, walking back into the mountains alone, smaller with every step. That evening Caleb stood outside long after the sun dipped behind the peaks. He had expected relief. Instead, he felt fear. "You chose this," he said when Mercy joined him. "I chose myself," she replied. Caleb nodded slowly. Then he spoke the words that mattered most. "If you stay," he said, "it won't be because I rescued you, and I won't pretend I'm easy to live with." Mercy met his gaze, steady and sure. "I'm not asking to be saved," she said. "I'm asking to be chosen, and I'm choosing you." That decision sealed their fate, because the mountains had one final test left, and it would not be gentle. The mountains did not care that Mercy had chosen to stay. They tested that choice immediately. 2 nights after Noah left, the dogs began barking, low at first, then frantic. Caleb was awake before the sound fully reached him. He grabbed his rifle, moving on instinct, every muscle tight with the knowledge he had tried to forget. Men were coming back. Not the broken father this time. The ones who had marked the trees. The ones who believed the mountains were theirs. Mercy stood in the doorway, coat pulled tight around her, eyes clear despite the fear she could not hide. "How many?" "At least 3, Caleb said. "Maybe more." She nodded once. No panic, no pleading. The woman who had been left to die in a blizzard was gone. They took positions as the first shots cracked through the trees. Bullets slammed into the cabin walls, splintering. Wood! Smoke burned in Caleb's nostrils. He fired back, precise and controlled, each shot chosen. One man went down, another screamed and retreated. Then came the shout. "Come out, old man," a voice called. "We know you're holed up in there." Caleb felt the familiar pull toward violence, toward ending this cleanly and alone. He glanced at Mercy. She was reloading, hands steady. "This ends tonight," she said. The outlaws tried fire next. A torch sailed toward the roof. Caleb sprinted, knocking it away before flame could take hold, but the movement exposed him. A bullet tore through his side. He staggered, breath knocked from his lungs. Mercy screamed his name once, then moved. She dragged him inside, blood already soaking his shirt, and pressed a cloth hard against the wound. The world narrowed to pain and smoke, and her face inches from his. "Stay with me," she said, voice shaking but fierce. The words hit him like a blow. He had said them to her once, in the storm. Caleb pushed himself upright. "Get behind the table," he ordered. "No," she said. They exchanged one look, agreement without words. When the door finally burst open, Mercy was the one standing in the open, shotgun braced against her shoulder. The outlaws hesitated, startled by the sight of her, by the certainty in her stance. That hesitation cost them. The blast echoed off the peaks. When silence returned, it was complete, broken only by wind moving through trees that had seen far worse. Caleb sank to the floor, blood loss catching up with him. Mercy was there instantly, holding him, hands shaking now that it was over. "You're not dying," she said, more command than comfort. He smiled faintly. "Seems I don't get that choice any more." She laughed through tears, pressing her forehead to his. By dawn, the danger had passed. Smoke drifted thin and pale into the sky. The cabin still stood. So did they. Caleb recovered slowly. Mercy did not leave his side, not once. Weeks later, when the scars had begun to heal and spring fully claimed the mountain, Caleb stood with Mercy at the edge of the clearing. "I lived 12 years waiting to die," he said. "You ended that." Mercy shook her head. "No, I just stayed." He took her hand, rough fingers closing gently around hers. "In this world," he said, "staying is the bravest thing there is. Violence leaves echoes, even when it ends cleanly." The mountains returned to their rhythm within days. Snow melt ran louder in the creeks. Birds came back. The clearing looked almost unchanged, if not for the scorched mark near the cabin wall and the shallow graves Caleb marked with stones beyond the tree line. No crosses, no names, just an end. Caleb healed slower than he liked. The wound stiffened in the cold mornings, reminding him that survival always collected a price. Mercy learned how to clean it, how to bind it, how to tell from his breathing when pain had gone too far. They did not speak much about the night itself. They didn't need to. It lived in the way Mercy checked the tree line before dusk, and in how Caleb no longer slept with his rifle within arm's reach. Something fundamental had shifted. The cabin changed first. A second chair by the fire. Shelves cleared for Mercy's books. The rhythm of days adjusted to two people moving through them instead of one. Caleb stopped thinking of the mountain as a place to disappear. Mercy stopped thinking of herself as someone waiting to be left. By summer, word spread quietly among trappers and passers-by. There was a forge-lit cabin high in the Rockies, a man who didn't talk much, a woman who did, and neither of them belonged to the world that had once rejected them. The trail below remained empty. They did not look back. Out on the frontier, justice rarely comes from courts or crowds. It comes from the choices people make when no one is watching. Mercy was abandoned because others decided her life weighed too much. Caleb survived because he chose to live without hope. Together, they proved both ideas wrong. In a land where strength is measured by endurance, not appearance, they learned that staying is sometimes braver than running, and choosing another person can be the hardest kind of survival. Now I'll ask you something. Where are you right now, and what were you doing when you reached the end of this story? Tell me in the comments.